What's going on, Packer fans? Welcome back to the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. And joining me once again, it's been far too long, the one and only Rachel Hotmeyer. You can follow her on Twitter at Rachel Hotmeyer. Rachel, how have you been? How are you feeling about cleanses? What's new? What's going on?
I wasn't motivated last year when Rodgers, name dropped the Ayurvedic cleanse because it just wasn't something I was interested in. But listen, if this man is swearing by it every offseason and now we've got back-to-back MVPs, I don't know. Maybe it's something to consider. There's a couple juice bars in the area. I'd be interested in if Rodgers is a client at any of those. But, maybe I'll take you up on it. But honestly, after a couple days of juices, I just want a burger. I don't know if I could do it for 12 days. Could you eat anything for 12 days?
I did do, I was going to talk about cleanses later, but I did do the 10-day lemonade cayenne pepper cleanse, where
which
all
is
I could
good.
have for 10 days was that was it. And I didn't touch an ounce of anything else, not a bite, not a crumb, not anything for 10 days. So I did do that one time. I don't recommend it and I wouldn't do it again, but I did complete that one.
Wow. I'm really impressed. And I've done, intentional fasting, and even some days just with the crazy lifestyle we have in this industry. I know some people intentionally intermittent fast, and I'll find myself just not having the time to eat until after the day's press conferences. But yeah, we can either dive into cleanses now or later. Where would you rather this?
We'll pause it for now because I think, for anyone that's starting the conversation, I'm assuming everyone that's watching us has heard in some capacity the Aaron Rodgers interview and probably knows at least a little of what we're talking about, but we'll at least transition there somewhat normally a little bit after this. But I don't even know where I necessarily want to start with Rodgers' interview. Of course, he does the interview with Pat McAfee. He has the, Instagram post on Monday night, Mm-hmm. And, there's, of course, a lot of conjecture and speculation as to what's going to happen. I think a lot of people were expecting an announcement. The interview was preceded by Ian Rappaport, who sort of also fed into that, saying like, hey, I think we're going to hear something within the next, 20, 30 minutes here. So there was sort of this wave of momentum building of, okay, this is going to be it. We're going to hear what's going to happen with Aaron Rodgers. And then, of course, he starts off the interview right away and says, I have not made a decision. And then it kind of goes from there in a variety of different directions. So I guess my first question for you is, what, if any, were your big takeaways from that interview, other than the fact that he hasn't made a decision yet?
Yeah, I think all of it was very interesting, but exactly what you said, conjecture. Rodgers never gave us or anybody the impression that tomorrow, being Tuesday, when he made that Instagram post, was going to be his big announcement. In all reality, Pat McAfee, as he should, drummed up his usual big Tuesday guest. And gets to take advantage of this kind of offseason narrative where he knows there's tension building. And good for him. He had over 137,000 views today. About noon is when I looked at that number before Rodgers came on at about 12:06. So good for him. You're getting the exposure, you're getting these numbers, and Rodgers knows he's bringing that traffic as well. So, I think Rodgers is more unfazed by the media than ever lately. He knows this is building. I mean, TMZ is talking about their alleged breakup, where it seems like Shailene is laughing in the background of this interview. So to me, Rodgers is just proving that he continues to tune out the noise even more personally than professionally. Almost. I'm not shocked that he didn't announce, because he said, I'm not certain about my decision yet. And when I'm certain, I'll be announcing that. That was the most interesting takeaway to me, because that shows the Packers still have work to do regarding either outcome. Bringing in Tom Clements clearly wasn't the deal sealer in this situation. And the fact that there is still wiggle room is astounding to me.
I agree. I think that was certainly noteworthy as well. When the Clements thing initially happened, I viewed it in likely one of two ways. Either like, okay, Rodgers has had a say in this, and, this clearly means that there's a connection and he's coming back. I don't think that's the case anymore. Now, he may have had a say in it. They may have talked about it either at the end of the season, or, they said, hey, there's a good chance that Luke Gutey goes elsewhere. Do you have anybody in mind that you think would like to be a quarterback's coach? Maybe that conversation happened via text message. Maybe it didn't happen at all. Who knows? But it's quite possible that Rodgers at least name dropped to Tom Clements at some point. It's also possible, and I think maybe even more leaning this way now that we know that there's no concrete Rodgers decision, that maybe Green Bay is starting to realize they have to make a legitimate push here to get him back. Because as we heard all last offseason, and certainly when he did sort of his airing of grievances, this is about the people. And it's not just about saying something, it's about actually doing something and backing up those words with actions. Well, this to me was a major signal from Green Bay of, if it's about the people, we're bringing in guys like Tom Clements. If it's about actions, we're bringing in your, favorite quarterbacks coach and the guy that was so instrumental in your success. But it also now screams to me a little bit of maybe not desperation, but okay, we need to do things like this to maybe potentially get him to come back. I'm more in that camp now. Now, he's a good quarterbacks coach regardless, right? So if all of a sudden it's Jordan Love, who better than to make that transition than a Tom Clements, who of course mentored Aaron Rodgers. It's a win-win no matter what for Green Bay, but it still screams to me that, okay, they're trying to do everything in their power to make sure that he comes back to Green Bay.
Yeah, I am curious how the successor of Love factors into that. Like, okay, we've got Clemens, exactly. It's almost a toss away win benefit, if you will, like okay, yeah. And I guess he could mentor our up and coming quarterback. And it really seems like that wasn't even the priority in this decision, but it is outstanding to me that at this point, Rodgers says he wants to make it a quick decision. And I'm not saying quick needed to be today, being yesterday when this is being listened to. I'm not saying quick is by anyone's calendar deadline other than his own. I am just fascinated at the admission that he's not certain yet, and that Green Bay could still win it or lose it. It's really theirs for the taking.
I was asked this today by Marcus Eversole on 107.5 in Green Bay, and I want your take on it as well. Why do you think, knowing what we know now, that Aaron Rodgers did that interview with Pat McAfee?
I think there's a level of friendship to them that he knows his cooperation and involvement with the show brings business in all sorts of ways and facets to the McAfee show. I think this is also another avenue of Rodgers saying he's trying to be more open and out there on social media and using his platform to talk about things, even though they didn't hit the book club today. I do think Rodgers is still trying to find his footing with his own public footprint and personality, if you will. And I think this is a media outlet that makes him feel comfortable to be himself. I do think it was super interesting, the admission of not guilt, but sadness and apologetic tone in realizing, and I really appreciated this honesty from him, not because I believe he should feel that way or anything, but again, in reflection over how the season has gone, to see how his COVID discourse affected his loved ones. I'm fascinated that he felt comfortable sharing, maybe remorse over handling that. I thought that was a really impressive moment. But again, I think Rodgers, for whatever reason, doesn't feel like he can hold those discourses and emotional discussions in press conferences, and instead would rather do that with McAfee. Do I wish it was in a setting we could all share? Of course. But ultimately, I think everybody can just be glad we're getting this level of transparency from a quarterback. It's not like you see guys of the same caliber like Brady acting like this. Yeah, sure, is Brady funny on social media? Of course, but you're not seeing this type of, again, emotional discourse. So to me, I think he sees value in this, and obviously there's mutual value for McAfee and Rodgers here.
No, there is. And actually that was my answer when Marcus asked it as well. I said, I think Aaron really likes doing these legitimately. I think he likes, being able to go on there and discuss more of himself and be transparent with Pat. I think he legitimately likes going on there on Tuesdays and talking with his friends. I think that's a legitimate piece of it. I'm sure there, maybe there's a piece that, it's McAfee's coming back after a week off and has the opportunity to have that interview. And I'm sure there's, maybe some mutual benefit there as well. But Marcus had an interesting take on it. And I sort of almost believe this to be the case after he brought it up. And after I thought about it a little bit more, I think there, like, if you remember, like after he got it out of the system of saying like, there's not going to be an announcement, he made like some comment to the effect of like, I wanted to take a second to go back and sort of review this past season without like the immediacy of it, the season just ending. Right. And as you kind of went through that, and you mentioned as well, that sort of the apology that, he kind of made towards, his loved ones, I felt more and more, and again, kudos to Marcus Eversole for this, but I felt more and more that this is him closing the chapter on the 21-22 season. And that almost like he needed to do that, just like he needed to go on the press conference and sort of air his grievances before he could, and kind of put the final nail in the coffin into what happened in the offseason before he could move forward with the 21-22 season. This almost felt to me like I need to put this piece to bed And then I can close that chapter and then start to actually evaluate, okay, now what do I want to do for my next chapter coming up? Does that include playing for the Packers? Do I want to go somewhere else? Do I want to retire? And the more I look back at that interview, the more I think Marcus is right. And I think there was some level of him just needing closure and to kind of move the chapter forward.
I definitely see perspective in that as well. Ultimately, Aaron Rodgers knows how to dominate and completely control not only his, sphere, but the entire media landscape. He does things on his terms, and he treats press conferences versus the McAfee show very differently in demeanor, in content, in emotional approach, you name it. So, the press conferences for the most part are very football driven. In a different sense, not like this isn't football driven content, right, but you know what I mean? A very game driven oriented team, stuff like that. And the McAfee show is just another outlet for him to express different facets of himself. So yeah, I can totally see. And the theme of this McAfee show was the start of the 2022 season. So I think Rodgers knew what he was getting into and joining this show and saying, okay, this is me, right? Like you said, closing that sort of chapter. And okay, I had my, post-season, post-loss, depressed, frankly, press conference. And now I can have my, more personal coming out of this 12-day cleanse era of gratitude in reflection. Rodgers ends things on a sense of gratefulness when he's reflecting. That's been the clear trend throughout the whole time. And obviously people could have thought what they want about the Instagram post, but the fact of the matter is that wasn't any indication of what was going to happen to today. And I was saying from the start that Instagram post is not tied to the McAfee appearance. And I was right on that. But ultimately, Rodgers is ready to close a chapter when he is in that grateful sense of reflection and able to move on. And that's his personal and now public signal of that.
I think that's a great observation. And then let me ask you this as well. Do you feel any different sitting here today about the Aaron Rodgers situation and what he might do than you did pre-Instagram post and pre-interview with Pat McAfee?
I really don't, because hashtag Monday Night Gratitude is so on brand for this man. That is just so non-withstanding a football business decision. He's been saying more and more over the past few years, he's trying to cherish those types of moments and people in his life and really take in the little things, the Friday night crew. Obviously, that's not going to be the same without the Cobbs around, even if Bakhtiari and Aaron stay, it might not be the same next season. Him and Shailene, if still together, have gone through a lot the past 2 years. He mentioned, 2 seasons with her, 2 MVPs, and then elaborated on that today, talking about how much stability she's brought him. I think they've discovered a lot about their relationship, even though PR wise, her publicist said they agreed to not talk about politics. They obviously experienced the last year, the pandemic and stuff very differently, because they were both in different sort of industries that had different vaccine requirements, stuff like that. So I just think for any couple that's been through the pandemic, it's been a very interesting period of self-discovery and discovering each other. So I don't think Shailene and Aaron are immune to that by any sense, but obviously people put celebrities like that on a pedestal and kind of over-examine that to an extent. So to me, no, I don't have any different perspective on what his potential future business decision for himself could be based on Tuesday, based on Monday night's Instagram post. It is the same to me as it was after the loss. And honestly, everybody said he stuck around town. That's an indication. Even going back as far as that, he did the same exact thing last year. That's a very normal and honestly respectful thing to do, to let the game results settle in and then have those front office discussions that need to, because Rodgers, like Davante Adams, which we'll touch upon, don't like to have those business discussions during the season. They're very game focused. So to me, nothing has changed throughout this trajectory from January to almost March now.
Yeah, I agree. If there's one thing that I feel maybe a slightly stronger pull towards, it's the fact that I'm really struggling to see him after this series of gratitude, after talking about how great his teammates are, after saying how the relationship with Gute has really improved, after saying, front office, his relationship with Matt LaFleur, joking about his eyebrows, after this entire reel, whether it's right after the press conference, right after the season, whether it was, at the awards, whether it was with McAfee either time, it's just been like, there hasn't been a hint of anything that would be negative towards the Packers. Now, it's not to say that there maybe isn't, but I still have a hard time believing that he goes through all of that and then says, but I'm demanding a trade. And again, nothing to me is off the table, and nothing would like completely shock me. But the more and more that this goes on, and the more that he stays complimentary of everyone, I'm having a harder and harder time finding an avenue where he says, yep, I want out. I want to trade to some other team. So that would be the only thing that I feel even a little bit more steadfast in today is I'm just struggling to see an avenue where he demands a trade to another team. Like I said, nothing would shock me, but that's maybe the only thing that changed ever so slightly. But I didn't think that was necessarily going to happen anyway.
And I think really the only key difference that has shifted in that sort of situational bubble is the outward emotional expressions of all this last year. This time was very tense. You knew there were kind of stone walls on both sides of the situation. Whereas allegedly after Gutey and Rodgers talk after that first walkthrough, when he returned to Green Bay this past summer, things changed and he kind of had this sort of not come to moment, but maybe a mutual understanding. A bridge was formed, rebuilt almost, where he felt his future relationship with this team, with this franchise was maybe a little more bonded and on solid ground than he felt like it had been the last few years. And he compared it to a similar moment in Brett Favre's career that he helped facilitate post-playing for him in terms of, okay, he's reaching these post-playing career milestones. Let's make sure he's a welcome and warm part of this franchise. And if Rodgers saw that trajectory happen and him have to kind of help rebuild that, then I'm sure he saw himself on a similar one when he realized communication wasn't what he liked it to be when you look around the league and you see younger quarterbacks having that with their franchise. So push came to shove and eventually clearly amends have been made. I don't know if it's 100%. I guess we'll never know what both sides, compromised on because Rodgers seemingly admitted for the first time today that he also made some compromises and looked inward about how he could have been a better two-way street in this conversation. But ultimately, I think whatever was said in that post walkthrough conversation, and I'm sure we all have footage on it from the first day of camp, was pivotal into whatever lies ahead for these two.
No, I agree. And all of that being said, and where I, kind of the feeling that he doesn't demand a trade, the one thing that he brought up very early in his not press conference, but interview with McAfee was what happens with Davante Adams. He's like, there's a guy out there, best in the league, number 17, so on and so forth, and not under contract right now. And it does start to feel more and more like this might be a package deal. Is this a 2-for-1 where it's either Adams and Rodgers or neither of them? I don't know that there's an avenue that exists where Rodgers is on the team and Adams isn't, or Adams is on the team and Rodgers isn't. And I think that's what makes this so interesting and so complex is, all right, if legitimately Rodgers won't come, and I don't know, that's just speculating. If Rodgers wouldn't come back, if Adams doesn't come back, that makes that contract all that much more important. If the agent of Adams gets wind of that, might be able to say, hey, you don't pay my client, you're not getting Rodgers either, which may make that negotiation a little bit tougher. And then the other side of that, which again makes all of this complexity come together, if they do pay Rodgers and Adams top dollar to come back and bring that duo together, the group of players that may suffer because of that are the Randall Cobbs, the Mercedes Lewises, the Billy Turners, the Mason Crosbys, like the guys that Aaron Rodgers is also very, very close with. Mm-hmm. So it's a really interesting Rubik's Cube of craziness that I don't envy the Packers for having to figure out. And when you have a star quarterback that wants some level of say over who's going to be back and who's not in those connections and wants those players back, I don't know how exactly they're going to navigate that. Tom Silverstein pointed out that the negotiations with Adams and the Packers have not really gotten off the ground at all. So I don't know where you feel on this, but to me, the next up on this list is what's going on with Davante Adams.
To my understanding, the Packers camp and Davante Adams side of this have not been able to find an agreement on what being the highest paid wide receiver in the league means and how that actually plays out. And that's the key of this issue here, because Davante Adams is top 2, not 2 route runners in this league. He is the best of the best in the NFL right now, and he wants to be paid as such. But for whatever reason, it seems like the Packers and him paint two different pictures of those numbers, how they play out. And there's a lot of complexities that go into this. Obviously, Russ Ball is probably working very hard on it, but here we are sitting here on YouTube. So ultimately, that's the crux of the issue here. And if this does become a package deal, I think unless Rodgers is willing to play with just the two of them and blow up a lot of the talent that they've tried building. When you see so many guys that are going to be forced to walk away from this team, some of them, their careers at the end of this, just because they're forcing them into the cap casualty category, you have to wonder when Rodgers will ever consider taking a pay cut. You really have to wonder if he's ever looked at, I hate to reference it again, but Brady or other quarterbacks that have been willing to take those pay cuts in order to not just maintain the teams around them. You want to run it back. Sometimes that has to be done, but just to keep a caliber of playing on the field. You want all your guys back again for one more year. Even if guys are willing to take vet minimums, you can't be asking them to do that and not doing at least something similar. So I don't see a way that this works unless Rodgers takes a pay cut and says it's time for Davante to earn his top dollar. And I respect that. And I want to play with him so much that I'm willing to shrink my cut of the pie to give him that. Or makes me want to vomit thinking about this. If any of you follow baseball, Orioles, Chris Davis situation being paid for decades, the Packers might do that. And Andrew Brandt will probably be extremely uncomfortable with it on Twitter, and as he should, because he put so much work into not having to do that for the Packers. And anybody that's ever managed regular books, let alone worked in salary caps with teams, knows how painful that is. But maybe they're willing to bite that bullet and just say, okay, Rodgers is our Chris Davis, and it's time to stretch this out just so we can appease the man.
Yeah. And I think that's going to be interesting too. And just to go really quick into the difference on the Davante Adams contract, when it comes to the big issue here is DeAndre Hopkins. So DeAndre Hopkins a couple of years ago signs this brand new extension with the Arizona Cardinals after he gets traded, and he had 2 years left on his deal. Mm-hmm. And he signs a 2-year extension, and that 2-year extension is reported as a 2-year $54.5 million extension, which is about 27.25 million per year extension. So of course, Davante Adams and his agent, rightfully so, are going to say, all right, 27 mil per season, roughly, maybe a little bit more, is the going rate for the best wide receiver, highest paid wide receiver in football. We want a 3 to 4 year, $27 million deal. That's what we're looking for. However, what Green Bay is going to counter with and say, you had 2 years left on your deal and you played out those 2 seasons at the current rates that you were set at. And if you average those 2 years that you played with the 2-year extension, guess what? It's actually more of like a 4-year deal at about 22 million per season. So that's the big issue here is Green Bay saying, hey, the highest paid wide receiver in football, we think you should be that, but we think that is 22 million per season. And Adams and his agents say, no. The extension he signed was 27 mil per season. If we're going to sign a 2 or 3 year deal, we want that 27, 28 million per season, and understandably so. So that's where the big issue comes in as to exactly what the high end of that contract is, which makes that contract so much more difficult. And of course, the agent might also be able to point to Aaron Rodgers and say, it seems like you guys really want Aaron Rodgers back. If you want Rodgers back, you better get Davante back. If you want Davante back, you better make sure he doesn't hit unrestricted free agency, and don't think we're playing on a 1-year franchise tag. Like, you better pony up for that 27, 28 million per year, which again, just adds layers and layers and layers of complexity to this, which is going to be so interesting.
Right. And Adams isn't a guy to sit out over this stuff. He expressed that very clearly last year in training camp, but ultimately teams can finagle their math all they want. They know what matters. They know that, ESPN, everybody's got those charts of the paydays. And ultimately, I think they're going to have to at least hit over 25 in order to kind of make both sides meet in this situation. They're not getting in the low 20s. It's going to have to be mid to high.
I tend to agree. And it's quite possible that he gets the high end of that, which also they sort of did with Bakhtiari as well in a similar situation, which also adds complexity to that, which is just ever so amazing. And it's going to, again, make this offseason that much more interesting. So we can't move forward without, past Rodgers, of course, without discussing the ever so popular Pancha Karma, which is a cleanse that Aaron Rodgers has done. I don't even know how far I want to get into this, but it was.
I'm ready. I'm ready. I've spent hours on this.
The floor is yours. The floor is yours. I will let you take this in any direction that you want, I think.
I think the point that everybody needs to remember here is, whether accidentally on purpose, you'd be hard pressed to find someone who hasn't double excreted in one evening at some point in their life. And here I'm going to allow Andy to contradict what I'm saying.
Never happened. Never happened. I've done a lot of weird diets.
I have so many questions. Like, you've never been ill? You've never been that hungover?
Oh, wait. Are you saying in a night or at the same time?
I mean, both.
In a night, I'm sure. At the same, this is going to be the most bizarre conversation ever. But no, not at the same time. That's never ever happened.
I can't wait for the comments on this. Someone in my newsroom today said, and I believe someone on the McAfee show said this as well. Like, you know, if you've never done it, not even on purpose, just by accident, it's the most cathartic feeling. And I'm like, yeah, I can only imagine. I think many people have experienced that accidentally before. I find it super interesting, the lengths he is willing to go to restore his body and what it does for him. Everybody has their different things. Some people don't work out or stretch for weeks on end. And this quarterback decides to just put his body through, to some people, what would be absolute hell, but to him is a very cleansing routine. Yeah, there's, you know, double excretion for quite a number of days, and there's enemas, and there's putting herbal drops in your nose. You're eating ghee, which is an alternative to butter, for many days on end. It's a fascinating process. I would love to know what a nutritionist says about it, but ultimately that's not what matters. What Packers fans should care about is it makes Aaron Rodgers feel good afterwards.
Yeah, you know what? He's won back-to-back MVPs doing some crazy fasting and whatnot. So I definitely think I could do the water. Like he said, he might do like a 5-day water cleanse. That I 1,000,000% feel like I could do and accomplish. I don't want to, but I feel like I could. Everything else, I think I'm gonna say hard pass on.
It's super interesting. I'd never heard of this one before. Last year when he was talking about Ayurvedic cleanses, I've heard of those. I do 2 days of juice and I'm crabby as heck. Like, I don't know how people go through that type of stuff peacefully and meditate. If you guys can't tell, I'm not a meditative person. And I admire those who can slow their brain down that much and really find that inner peace. But I'm just fascinated and I'm interested, and I would love, maybe not an Aaron Rodgers book club, but a nutrition club, a wellness club.
Yeah, I think it would be very interesting to see, you know, some of the different thoughts and theories on some of that stuff. I think that'd be very interesting, actually. So we shall see. We'll see if his cleanse results in maybe another season in Green Bay, maybe another MVP, and go on from there. And then maybe a new cleanse next year. I don't even want to know what's next. If it continues to escalate past this, I don't know what the next thing would be, but only time will tell, I guess. Anything that you're expecting from a Brian Gutekunst press conference on Wednesday?
That just depends on, you know, the questions that the beat brings to the table. I'm hopeful that we get some insight from him on his perspective of how Gutey and Rodgers' relationship has grown in the past year, because like Rodgers gave him props for, there's been a lot more communication and instigation of that relationship on Gutekunst's end. I'm not expecting anything bombshell, truly. I believe if today was the day that Rodgers was going to come out with it, maybe Gutekunst would as well. But it's definitely an interesting time to put this up. Obviously, this is a pre-scheduled pre-combine press conference. Everybody knows that. It's just, this will hardly, if at all, be about the combine or what they're drafting for. And I think these opportunities are really important to put your front office out there and take questions from the media. Maybe he's not as accessible as on other beats, but I do think this is an important time to kind of lay the groundwork for everybody and see what the situation is.
What's the over under on how many draft/combine questions he's actually asked on Wednesday?
I'll set it at 2.
I'll take the under. I think maybe there might be 1, but I don't think there's going to be 2. I think the only other. I
need your thoughts afterwards on who's going to ask that question.
Yes. Yeah. That's yeah. Leave your comments below, everyone. Anywho, the only other piece of news that we need to discuss very quickly is Green Bay does have a new kicker. We see that Green Bay picked up Dominique Eberle from, played at Utah State and spent some time with the Raiders, and Rich Bisaccia spent some time with the Texans. Actually got called up as a COVID recall and did a pretty nice job kicking this past season in that game, including hitting a 50-yarder, all of his extra points, had a few touchbacks. So thoughts on the Packers' newest kicker and what this may mean for one Mason Crosby?
I think Crosby, regardless of this signing beforehand, has to be one of the easiest cuts to make, unfortunately. And I don't think that necessarily has to do with his play last year. But if we are just basing that off the standard, you can get kickers that good for a hell of a lot cheaper. And that's just the reality of the situation. And I think that just comes with natural playing ability anyway. That's what kickers are built to do, is kick. So I'm interested in this signing. I'm interested in seeing how good he is. Listen, if he comes out swinging, that's great. I can only imagine this must have been a Bisaccia, like, oh yeah, I know this guy, like bring him in. It's cool. And he's got enough experience compared to what else they're bringing in to camp these days. So I think it's like, all right, cool.
Yeah, it definitely seems like Bisaccia already has some pull, right? He gets his assistant special teams coach in the door. He gets a kicker that he worked with in 2020 in the door. So it seems like he's having some say and pull already in the organization, which is great. If you're going to bring in that guy and make him one of the highest paid, if not the highest paid special teams coordinator in the league, let him cook and figure out what he wants and let him start remaking that special teams in his image. So I like that. I agree with you. I think Crosby has probably kicked his last kick as a Packer, barring maybe a massive restructure and saying, hey, if you want to take the vet minimum, we'll let you compete in camp with Molson and Eberle and we'll see who comes out. Maybe that could be a scenario. I think there's also a retirement scenario out there for Crosby as well. So we will see. But how crazy would it be after over a decade of Aaron Rodgers and Mason Crosby if two kids from Utah State are the ones that replace Rodgers and Crosby and Jordan Love and Dominic Eberle?
Yeah, it's really crazy. I noticed Love reposted, the Eberle signing earlier, dapping up his guy. But yeah, what a great day for Utah.
Yeah, great day for Utah. Oh, unbelievable. Rachel, anything else you want to go over? Anything you want to plug on the way out? Anything at all?
Don't talk to me about draft board season. We're not there yet. I'm choosing to ignore that season. So for now, we're still appreciating the Packers drama.
All right. I'm cool with that.
That's where my mindset is right now.
Every single year I follow the exact same thing happens. As soon as the season ends, I get super excited. I'm going to dig right into the draft. And then I'll maybe start with a couple of prospects and realize that my mind just needs like a month off from watching tape. And then I get into March and then I get super excited in March and I start watching tape and so on and so forth. And then March Madness and free agency hits in mid-March and I get totally distracted for a couple of weeks. And then end of March and then all of April is just me it's all draft all the time. And then that's where it really it's the same thing every single year. And now we have a cameo.
Maybe she's interested in the draft. Maybe it's time to learn something new.
There we go.
Are you a draft girl? I'm a free agency girl, but okay, we can compromise.
Deal. Ridiculous. All right. That's Rachel Hotmeyer and special guest, Amazing Cat. I'm Andy Herman. I think that does it for us today. Any other final thoughts or meows?
Just kisses.
Ridiculous. Make sure to subscribe to the Pack a Day podcast if you haven't already. Make sure to check out today's audio podcasts over wherever you get your favorite audio podcasts. Go follow Rachel on Twitter at Rachel Hotmeyer. You can follow the podcast at Pack a Day Podcast. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.